Two petitions for indefinite leave to remain were recently discussed by Parliament. Should the government double the pathway to 10 years, or should immigrants be allowed to reside after 5 years? The arguments were intense, passionate, and incredibly illuminating. Many people believed they already knew how the MPs would vote in this debate. However, if you pay close attention, you might be surprised at the turn this conversation took. We will thus be dissecting the MPs' real statements today, what this implies for those who are currently on the 5-year settlement track and what the future may hold. Many would wonder why this argument is taking place in the first place. Thousands and thousands of immigrants or people actually endorsed two petitions regarding the qualifying timeframe for ILR. In the first petition, the government was urged to keep the 5-year settlement route open for people who currently possess skilled worker visas. The second petition urged the UK to uphold the commitments made to British nationals living in Hong Kong who were granted a 5-year settlement route after fleeing oppression. I won't delve into the specifics of this whole British nationalist issues past. Throughout the conversation, the word fairness kept coming up. The 5-year road has become the focal point of people's life planning. Decisions about jobs, mortgages, and children attending school have all been made with the next 5 years in mind. Midway through, the UK government abruptly reversed this. It's not merely unjust. They say it's similar like shifting the goalpost in the middle of a game. They put it that way. Additionally, MPs cautioned that it might face legal challenges. Retrospective legislation, they claimed, is terrible law and should only be used in cases of national emergency, which this obviously does not qualify. As we are now discussing their justifications for their particular position, naturally, there were rebuttals, which we shall hear about later. In addition to the retroactive law, there is the credibility factor. The Hong Kong British overseas nationals remarked that if Britain breaks its word now, particularly with reference to the overseas nationals, it undermines trust not only domestically but also globally. A donation was another major point of contention. Recall the White Paper's suggestion or proposal that individuals who have made sufficient economic contributions may have a shorter 5-way pathway to settlement. Contribution was thus still another important factor in this discussion. MPs contended that immigrants already pay hefty rent, income, and visa fees, as well as immigration and health search fees. The cost of each of the things I just described was broken down by one of the MPs, who came to the conclusion that some families really spend more than £60,000 per person simply to be able to lawfully remain in the UK. I'm positive there's more. However, it was her calculation. Additionally, that is the amount you will spend over a 5-year period. However, it was not all. An additional member of Parliament stated that the annual contribution of immigrants to the UK economy is approximately £84,000. Furthermore, a large number of them are entrepreneurs. They improve their communities and even generate employment in their localities. They contend that some of the other immigrants work as counselors in their communities and others are volunteers. Therefore, immigrants participate in civic life in addition to working. Another criticism was directed at the health industry, claiming that 1 in 5 NHS employees is an immigrant, and that number is nearly half in London. During COVID, one MP reminded the House that these workers maintained the hospital's operations even as persistent racism, yet the dispute was easy. These are the exact individuals because losing would be too costly for Britain. Now, in addition to all these figures and all these scenarios, this discussion also covered actual persons. A few foreigners took their opportunity to correspond with their different MPs, and in fact, a few of them told this tale. All these correspondences throughout this conversation or during this discussion, an MP read a letter from a knowledgeable employee in his member who stated, and I quote, "If when put into effect, this suggested modification will cause needless instability for myself and thousands of other families. It will raise uncertainty, lengthen monetary and psychological stress, and discourage those who are already making valuable contributions to the UK, paying taxes, and putting in a lot of labor. Migrants are more than simply data. We already call this country home as parents, professionals, volunteers, and caregivers. We want to be a part of the UK, completely integrate, and keep doing our best. That will be made more difficult, not easier, by this idea. In fact, during this dispute, This letter was circulated, and it wasn't all. Another member of parliament mentioned a skilled worker in his constituency who arrived on a skilled worker visa along with her spouse and son. According to the MP, this employee joined the neighborhood church and is making every effort to give back to their community, but they now worry that they are being taken advantage of. Additionally, another member of parliament stated that care packages in Scotland's far north have failed due to a lack of workers, forcing elderly patients to be readmitted to hospitals, which he described as dishonorable. Then there are Hong Kong families, with parents launching enterprises and kids enrolled in school. Britain promised a shelter, so they came here. Since Beijing has already warned Hong Kong not to trust Britain, the MP claimed that breaching this pledge will not only destroy them but also provide Beijing propaganda wins. Exploitation was another important topic that was covered. Care workers are particularly susceptible, according to the MP, because their visas are linked to a single company, making it impossible for them to change jobs if their current one doesn't work out. They run the possibility of being deported. Some of these care providers were compelled to sign unjust contracts, they pointed out. Some were told they would be sent home if they complained, while others were crammed into overcrowded housing. The kicker is right here. According to the MP who raised this issue, if the government decides to extend Diller for another 10 years, people would be stuck in this system for a lot longer. That was his justification for the government not raising skilled workers Diller to 10. According to the MP, care providers are particularly at risk because their visas are linked to a single employer. They are unable to change jobs if their current one doesn't work out. They run the possibility of being deported. Some of these care providers were compelled to sign unjust contracts, they pointed out. Some were told they would be sent home if they complained, while others were crammed into overcrowded housing. The kicker is right here. According to the MP who raised this issue, if the government decides to extend Diller for another 10 years, people would be stuck in this system for a lot longer. That was his justification for the government not extending skilled workers Diller to 10 years. Thus, they advocated for a sector-wide visa program that would enable employees to switch jobs, report mistreatment, and maintain their status. You may be thinking that everyone agreed with the government's decision to not extend the Diller pathway for another 10 years. If you believed that, you were mistaken. One MP made the counter-argument that, over the course of their lifetime, immigrants spend more on services than they pay in taxes. Where have I heard this before, I wonder? I believe I have a video of someone who stated this exact thing. That then was her contention, and she described the recent spike in immigration as a disastrous error that has cost the nation billions of pounds. According to her, fairness should be extended to British taxpayers, and a 5-year visa does not entitle one to permanent residence. She even maintained that the regulations ought to apply retroactively because, in her words, the British people are our top priority. It was among this debate's most acerbic exchanges. Some MPs argue that only British taxpayers should be treated fairly, while others insist that immigrants who are already in the country be treated fairly. You're probably wondering, what is the government's response to all of this? Although he reiterated the government's position that settlement is not a right, the minister acknowledged the contributions of immigrants, particularly Hong Kongers, who he claimed had blended quite well, and pledged that the route will continue to be available. The white paper establishes the baseline at 10 years, which is significant. But there may be fast-track choices for people who are contributing significantly. However, who are these individuals that are contributing significantly? Importantly, he made no mention of whether or not these regulations will be enforced retroactively. I promised a consultation later this year, he stated. People are still in limbo as a result. It seems as though it keeps circling around and over. You believe that something is about to happen, but then it returns to uncertainty. Everyone is still in limbo, you know, despite all of this wait and everything else. Don't go just yet, though, as we have some important conclusions and some analysis from this discussion that took place on September 8th. The first is that the majority of the MPs strongly urged the government to keep the goalposts for those who are already in the nation the same. The second is that the British nationals in Hong Kong enjoyed extremely strong support from their overseas counterparts. Britain was under genuine pressure to fulfill his pledge, like a lot of support. Third, there is ample evidence of exploitation in the care industry. Fourth, companies are cautioning that the UK may lose appeal to skilled personnel if settlement possibilities are extended. However, as I previously stated, the government's baseline is still 10 years old, and all of the specifics are being transferred to a consultation. The date of the consultation is unknown. There is nothing that will help us predict what will happen and when. However, it's crucial to take note of this. You'll be shocked to learn that hundreds of thousands of people have watched this debate alone. This demonstrates how important this problem is to communities, families, and immigrants throughout the United Kingdom. However, merely observing the MP's speech is not the same as comprehending what he said. The tone of the place was the first thing that caught my attention. On the one hand, the MPs were emotional as they related the stories of immigrants, caretakers from the NHS, Hong Kong British citizens, foreign nationals, and others who had made this their home. The smaller group of MPs on the other side of the room were colder and more focused on lowering immigration at all costs, but at least we know that most of them support the 5-year pathway to settlement. The question of whether this rule will apply retroactively was left unsaid, leaving everyone in limbo. However, keep in mind that this debate wasn't held in a vacuum. It was all a part of the government's larger plan to lower net migration, even though the ILR was the main focus of this discussion. Therefore, families and their plans for the future are unknown as a result of this entire argument. Here is the conclusion. On September 8th, nothing changed in the legislation. Although petition discussions typically don't result in votes, they are important because they make the government answer and demonstrate where the MPs have drawn the line. You should also remember that many MPs are trying to safeguard your part if you're on the 5-year settlement path. The government has yet to make a decision, and the next step in the fight will be consultation. That's the summary of the debate. So what are you waiting for if you haven't subscribed yet? You can only help this channel in that way. Please click the subscribe button, activate the notification bell, like and share this video.